I'm on my laptop showing screen app. Hunter's getting set up in VR, and we're going to see the Gravity Sketch ecosystem in action. So, while we're known for VR, this demo is going to show how our tools extend beyond VR headsets with these types of screen based apps that make collaboration accessible for everyone on your team, no matter how they work. So, again, if you're building cinematic worlds or crafting game environments, maybe shaping the next iconic character, all the same challenges you see in product design, which are spatial intent and scale, composition, clarity of form, sightline, silhouette readability, you're all going to see that apply here. Um, and we're really excited to show this live to you. And I see Hunter's already waving in the room saying hi. Hunter, I'll let you take it away from here.
Yeah, absolutely. So, hey again, everyone. So, as you can see, like MC was saying, I'm in VR. I'm using an Oculus MetaQuest 3 headset. So, this is untethered. The only reason I have the cord on right now is just for charging so that it doesn't die for whatever reason. But yeah, I'm in here in our collab room, and I'm going to walk you through a full character creation workflow really quick, showing how we would go from a rough idea all the way to export ready assets for those next phases. And just in case anyone is, you know, super new to this, doesn't understand what a collab room is, here in Gravity Sketch, MC, like she said, she's here on screen collab so she can see everything that I'm doing. And this room is great because it's more than just a review space. It's also a creation space. So I can draw, I can sketch, I can surface, I can bring in assets from third-party tools or programs like 3D geometry, 2D data, and we can operate and work in that together. So with that being said, I'll kind of move over here to our character creation workflow. And this was just a quick character that I put together for the sake of this demo and kind of showcasing some of these workflows that we're seeing with our current clients. So we always start here where we start with just really, really rough blockouts at full scale. And this one right here, you can see this is just a combination of sketch tool and what we call volume tool, which same idea, but rather than doing an individual sketch, it lets me create a volume very quickly. And in this case, I actually created somewhere between 15, 20 of these over the course of half an hour. This was the one that I thought was the most promising or the most interesting. And so that's why I kind of continued with that one. And as part of that process, you can pull in reference images, you can pull in 2D data, you can pull in videos like I brought over here on the side of just the general workflow that I worked on. And that helps you to ideate both with freedom, but also within the context that you need as a designer or as an artist, whether you're working in an environment like we're going to talk about here in a second, and you have a set space or you have reference images or 2D sketches that you want to build from. So using tools like that volume and revolve tool, we can sketch those forms super quickly to establish silhouette, posture, play with the proportions before locking anything down. And it's great for speed and spatial intent. But if we move over here to kind of the second phase, this is where we start refining the topology and just the general structure of the surfaces. So all of this is modeled and built here within Gravity Sketch. We have the opportunity to either start with primitives, convert those to subdivision data, and then build off from that. Or we can actually start with our surfacing tools if we want to go from scratch and just very quickly build things manually. All of this can be edited in color in terms of kind of materials. And we've got a lot of new settings in here recently as well that lets you take this to that next phase of just being refined. But in this case, you can see I kind of took that 3D sketch that was very rough and very quickly started to build that out in Gravity Sketch. So we've moved this more defined geometry. We can use those polygon modeling tools, edit individual vertices, edges, faces, and I can push and pull those forms. So if I actually reach out and just grab this piece, you can see that this is all editable in real time. So I can move that and make these adjustments as we go and start to get to a really refined version of what I'm looking for. So in this case, I'll just undo that so I don't break it. But yeah, as we go through, we start from really rough to more refined, figure that out here in app. And then this one over here kind of represents the downstream workflows. So I'm able to take that model and I can organize that through layers or through groups to make sure that it's really effectively handled. And then I can send that to kind of like an export. So in this case, I actually took it to Blender and rigged it. So if I grab this object and this model, I can move it. And you'll see here in a second when I kind of bake that, that rig is live and active data here in app. So in this case, I exported it as a .blend file. I could also use GLB, USDZ, FBX. Those files can then be sent to Unreal, Unity, Blender, Maya, or if for whatever reason you're going into more CAD workflows, maybe say you're prototyping for a physical asset that's going to be used in a movie or a set piece, you can send that to SolidWorks or CATIA or Rhino. All of those tools handle it extremely well. And I think I see down here, Will actually joined the room. So uh, I see Will down here at the bottom. This is a great example of how we're able to operate and collaborate within the space. So while I've got these models in here, at any stage, Will is able to join in. And I'll let you give kind of a quick introduction to yourself, Will, and what you are currently working on.
Yeah, yeah, I'm kind of crashing this this webinar a bit, but yeah, hi, I'm Will. I'm a product engineering lead at Gravity Sketch. I work on the VR app, um, and kind of not designing, but building and coding a lot of the interactions that we have. So yeah, I'm here to show off some of the collaboration tools that we've got. So you can annotate both on the screen app that you're seeing on your screen, but also if I've got a VR headset as well, I can join Hunter in the room and I can start redlining. I can start, maybe there's some measurements that I want to get, particular tolerances to. But yeah, the immersive review process is great because it helps everyone, like all your stakeholders, understand like the design like more intuitively and also in context. So even though I'm here in London in our London office and Hunter's over in the US, the two of us are able to collaborate in a shared space. We can edit on the fly. We can redline. We can change what we want. And with all of this, it's really useful because redlining on this finished model is maybe a little strange, but like with Hunter, I could have jumped in right at this stage, and we can far faster identify issues, make subtle tweaks, and kind of cut out rework later down the line, or even reduce the number of physical prototypes you might have to make just to verify that everything comes out the way you want. So all of this, especially this review process, we're seeing a lot of faster iteration cycles in industry, kind of a real speed up of the whole design process. So yeah, with this design review, it kind of leads to a lot easier decision making. It's a lot easier for Hunter and I to completely understand the 3-dimensional model of what we're going to end up with, and end up with just a shared understanding of exactly what the kind of character in this case is going to be before we get to production. But yeah, I guess I'll hand back to Hunter, having crashed in a bit here.
Yeah, thanks, Will. So, yeah, I mean, as you can see, Gravity Sketch, it's not just about modeling, it's about designing smarter and doing that together. So, whether it's kind of this blue sky sketching to final asset handoff, it helps your team stay aligned and move faster and do that in a more collaborative, cohesive way, but also with context and with freedom. So, my history, like I did a lot of work in 3D tools. I was always frustrated that I didn't have the creative freedom that I had with pen and paper. Gravity Sketch is kind of what provided that to me, and that's why I've been using it for the vast majority of my professional career now. And we see the same thing amongst a lot of our creative concept artists and art directors and everybody else that's using the tool. But you can see over here on the right, actually, we've got some other examples of character creation that we've seen from the industry. So just some awesome work by people like Glenn Southern. And you can see there's a variety of workflows in here. I showed that one with some hard surfacing just because that's my background, having been from automotive and med tech and robotics. But you can really use the tool for anything, whether it's more organic soft surfacing, more rigid hard surfacing like we just showed there. And you can see some awesome examples from some of our community users and people who are working in industry, taking it from the various levels, whether it's first initial rough sketches and using it purely as an ideation and intent finding tool, to then all the way down to later stage where they'll actually complete models in here, send it to either Game Engine or Blender or whatever downstream tool they want to get that next level. But I know that we've kind of covered a lot of this quick character creation overview. Before we move on, are there any questions that people have on that character creation workflow? Feel free to drop them in the chat. And if not, we'll keep moving, but just wanted to give a second there to see if anything popped up.
Yeah, thanks for that pause, Hunter, and thanks, Will, for joining. We had one question, and I think the community here is amazing, and everyone has taken a shot at answering, but I'm going to share here as well. What format is used to download to Blender and after rigging back to GS? You kind of went over that part really quickly, so just wanted to, yeah, if you could play that back, that would be great.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So GS is pretty interesting in the way that it handles those rigs. In this case, I exported as a .blend file from Gravity Sketch to Blender. The reason I did that is that when you export as a blend, we actually create modifiers that are aligned to what you're seeing in Gravity Sketch. So if you have a mirrored object, when you export that .blend file, open it in Blender, it shows as an active modifier, right? It's no longer do you have to go through that FBX issue of exporting and then reapplying modifiers and processing the file. It just goes straight to Blender that way, which is great because what it let me do was then manually rig that in Blender. I applied a rig via vertex grouping and vertex groups, and then I sent that back here to Gravity Sketch, and that came through as an FBX with the rig applied. There are different file formats. Some of them work better than others. There's no real one right way to do it. In this case, I was using FBX with the armature included. There's some settings from Blender that you have to click on export. But yeah, that'll actually send it through. What's cool is, I'm not sure if you can pin to my headset.
Yeah, let me do that now.
But this rig that we imported, each of these bones from shoulder down to wrist were actually just their own manual bones, but we have an IK solver here in Gravity Sketch. So you can see all I have to do is grab this hand and move it, and it kind of completes that IK for everything else. But definitely makes it a lot easier for what we're about to show here in a second, which is more shot planning, storyboarding, to have this model rigged up in a way that is just a little bit more useful for manipulating it later on.
Yeah, and Hunter, just to follow on, maybe we can try to take these two last questions. One is because you were just on the topic of Blender and rigs. I think you just gave an example of how that is used in GS, but that was one of the questions. How are Blender armatures and rigs used in GS? I think you just showed how to move body parts in GS in real time. So I think that question was answered. And thanks, Marcelo, for answering that question as well. And then maybe the last question is, so one, I think about the first one, Blender armature rigs using GS. And then there's a question from Jason about no UV unwrapping. Yeah, so I'll let you take those two, and then we should probably move on. And folks, if you have more questions, we'll save them and try to answer them either at the end or in email.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So I'll show it here in a second, actually, because that's the first thing we got to talk about with the environment planning on how those rigs can be used. In this case, when you import it back to Gravity Sketch and you've done the process correctly, anytime that I grab an object and go into edit mode, it'll just, rather than like editing the surfaces, it'll take me to edit mode for that rig. So if you're familiar with Gravity Sketch, it's the exact same workflow as the mannequins that are built here in app, which we'll talk about here in a second for anyone who's not familiar with it. But yeah, and then in terms of the kind of question on UV unwrapping, in this case, I took this file and I kind of sent it over to Blender, and I actually have this all as one object that I then UV unwrapped in Blender and applied these materials to. So while this is one object, the materials here are actually their own texture map that I brought in. And actually, I'm not sure if I have that on hand, but I can certainly look really quick just to show you an example of what that looks like, because it is, yeah, here it is. Probably the simplest texture map I've ever made, because I quite literally just went through and did very, very rough UV unwrapping and then placed each of those within these different spaces. The only thing I really had to worry about were the texture for the eyes and then the texture for the Gravity Sketch logo and the chest plate. But everything else was just really, really quick, rough unwrapping, and all of that for the sake of efficiency, right? You can get as perfect in terms of the asset as you want to. But in this case, I was really just looking to get it done quickly and get it sent back over here and have it so that rather than a full grayscale model, like you may be seeing here, it has those textures applied in a way that actually provides the material breakup and color blocking, which is just a lot better and a lot easier in my opinion. But we handle those UV unwrapping. We don't necessarily do UV unwrapping here in app. I could, if I wanted to, come in and apply a texture. So let's say, for example, I grab this guy and go with a carbon fiber texture. You can manipulate that texture on the object and scale it and rotate it. And you can see here just how broken my UVs actually are from the way that I did it. But yeah, anything that we have local. So in this case, if I come back over here and grab this, it's much easier to apply that texture and edit it here in app. So if I wanted like a carbon fiber chest plate on the robot, I could absolutely do that too. But yeah.
Nice. Yeah, Hunter, thank you so much. I see a lot of questions coming through, but we're going to save those for the end and we're going to continue because there's the world building that we want to get to. And time check, Hunter, we're at 19. So we have about a little over 10 minutes left.
Perfect. All right. Well, yeah, I guess what we'll do then is we'll move on to kind of the world building and environment, more spatial side. So everything we just said was kind of character creation. In this case, this is a great example of what I could use that model for. So if you go ahead and go to the next shot, MC, you can see there's this kind of apartment building that I've built here. And this was actually imported. It was a free asset with free licensing that I got online. I imported that in here. You could obviously import your own assets if you made something someone else. But I took that rigged robot and just very quickly started to pose it and play with it and create other assets in here as well. So in this case, I wanted it to be kind of like for lack of a better word, kind of like a brainless little robot that was doing stupid stuff. So I was like, okay, maybe he's running out of the door with a bag and there's groceries falling out and he's just completely unaware. I think if you go to the next viewpoint, MC, you can see some other options that I used it for where, you can come in and plan specific shots with those cameras that are built here in app. Or if you continue, there's some other situations that the robot's kind of gotten himself into where he's sitting up here on top of the roof or trying to balance very dangerously so on top of that building. But this is a great example of just really quick shot planning, environment building, trying to express those creative discoveries in 3D so that when you go to that next phase, you've got more security, you've got more conviction in terms of what your plan is. And it doesn't have to be that finalized, right? That's an example of a more finalized asset and bringing in that rigged model. If you go to the next one, MC, this is another example of what we see with a lot of the creative directors that use the app and some of the creative artists where they may come in here and use the volume tool to just incredibly quickly build out really rough environments. So in this case, right, what's awesome about this is I can scale myself up and I can see the environment as if I were standing in it. And this is just a really good way to design at scale, to have context, and to very, very quickly create an environment or in the case of game design, maybe it's a gaming level or it's a set, whatever that might be. And we've got some examples coming on later on here of what that might look like in a professional setting. And then the third way that we see our users using it quite often is just for really rough shot planning and layout. So in this case, these are mannequins that we have built into the application. I can rig these are actually already pre-rigged. And so I can come in here and position them any way that I want to. And I can use our viewpoints to kind of establish individual shots. So I think if you click through to the next one, MC, it may actually snap to one of the shots that I was kind of planning for this one, where it's got, and maybe it's not in there and you just snap to my headset, but just an example of planning out camera shots, planning out environments, and just really roughly building that scaffolding. So whether you want to do something incredibly quickly in here just to get an idea of the 3D space, or you want to take it to that next level and have full-on reviews in the 3D space with your team or your leadership, or you just want to use it for yourself to kind of roughly build out an idea for a space or a character, the tool has a lot of opportunities to do all of that, right? The idea here is that it's trying to provide creative freedom as much as possible. And if we scoot over to the side, we can see some of what our kind of power users in the industry are using it for. So if we start with games, you can see here, we've got some really cool stuff from Mighty Coconut and Lucas Martel with Walkabout Mini Golf, where they're actually ideating spaces here in Gravity Sketch. We got the CrowdStrike Super Bowl commercial where they were using it to ideate on characters and spaces as well. Magic the Gathering Arena and used it to prototype battlefields and cinematic environments. So it's not always about pixel perfect visuals. It's about understanding space, composition, and storytelling from the very first sketch. So there's that from the gaming side, but also from kind of film animation use case. They use it very frequently as a go-to tool for blocking shots and even virtual cinematography to some level. So they've used it in films like Avatar with Jonathan Bach and Lightstorm Entertainment. So they're treating that VR space as a virtual soundstage, and artists can walk through the set, explore camera angles, even map out sequences before a single layout frame is rendered, or they go to that level of full-on commitment. So some teams use it for that. Some use it for 3D storyboarding, where correctors and storyboard artists lay down props, characters, and cameras in VR. They import them from other tools and then export quick animatics or shot references. So it's faster, it's more immersive, and it's easier to share with teams across departments. And even for teams in virtual production, Gravity Sketch can plug directly into Unreal Engine pipelines. Great example is our friend over at Netflix, Ty, who worked with them on real-time filmmaking setups. So whether he was designing sets, full props at scale, bringing them straight into Unreal, it's bridging that gap between concept and virtual shot and shot planning. So because everything is designed in real world scale, what you see in VR translates one-to-one into the engine. So there's a lot less guessing. There's a lot less back and forth. And there's just a lot more conviction in the decisions that are being made in all phases of that process. So whether you're storyboarding a sequence, prototyping gameplay flow, building a set for virtual cameras, these tools give artists a lot more freedom, and they give directors more clarity earlier on in the process. So one that I wanted to call out over here as well, we've got some other examples of just great workflows from Lip over at Netflix. And one that we are going to be talking about a bit more pretty soon is with Darren. So on May 29th, he's speaking as part of the Around Festival. So if you're curious to hear more about how he used it on Wallace and Gromit and Vengeance Must Foul, you can absolutely join in on that. I highly recommend it because he's such a pro. You can see some shots over here that he shared of working on Chicken Run and designing individual set pieces that then became reality and were used in the film. So there's no shortage of great examples from our community members.
From Greg, what's the rule of thumb you use for scaling objects?
Oftentimes I'll have individual rooms, right? Each room is infinite in terms of its space. So you could have as many different things in here as you want. I like to keep it a little bit more organized, and I like to try to stay at 1-to-1 for my initial step, right? Then I'll zoom out and get big or get really tiny and zoom into details. But one thing I picked up when I was at Nerf was this idea that if you get too close to something too soon, you're going to lose the bigger picture. And if you try to zoom out too far, you're going to lose that context as well. So I always start with 1-to-1 scale. I always start sketching at 1-to-1 scale. If I don't start there, I definitely evaluate at 1-to-1 scale wherever I can. But yeah, I usually will start with myself at that scale, and then ideate on something quickly, say, okay, this feels right or this feels wrong. And then if I need to be really precise, I'll import existing placeholders. So in the case of Gravity Sketch, we've got these mannequins, and I'm just dropping one in the room very roughly right now, so it's not at scale. But you can import these guys at scale, and they're a cool rate starting point because these are 50th percentile, right? For male-female mannequins, really, really good starting point for context.
We have time for one more question, and then I want to do a little bit shout out for the last remaining comments just to kind of highlight some really interesting points. So last question. Have you tried rigging and uploading scanned human avatars in GS before, Hunter?
So I've tried a few things. The one thing that I'll say is that when you rig those models, a lot of times people want to do like bendy bones or mesh deformation. You can get away with it depending on how you model them, how you rig them in the side vertex groups. But weight painting from Blender and from those other tools tends to have a little bit of difficulty when it comes in here. So we've got examples of how that works in terms of, let me actually see if I can pop it in here real quick. In terms of the human body and some of those different pieces. So let me bring in this hand model really quick so you can see an example of what that might look like. So this one, you can see it's not super high quality, but definitely not a rigid kind of pivot and point setting. But these are all kind of set up in vertex groups so that you don't have to go through and weight paint those and create a really complex map or rigging. Some rigs will be harder if it is a very high poly, high quality model to bring in here. In general, when we're working on tethered, I like to try to stick around 300,000 polygons to 500,000 polygons. You can bump that up to a couple million, depending on what the file actually is. But I try to work with, relatively light assets in here just so that I can stay on an untethered headset. Of course, you can tether that if you want to. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely some workflows, and I'll definitely try to get a video out showing you guys kind of start to finish of how you go about doing that and some of the nuances of the tool.
Thanks again, Hunter, Will, for joining us here, and for everyone around the world for being with us today. I'm very grateful for everyone for your time and interest, and we're so Looking forward to seeing you either at a round or our next demo. Stay tuned. We'll also be having more of these demos in the future. So if you're in our newsletter, you'll get more information on that and want to support your design journey at Gravity Sketch. And yeah, see you all next time.